I'm very proud, leading on from my speech this morning, to be able to introduce our keynote speaker, Sarah DaVanzo. You know, Sarah is what they call a trend watcher, a futurist, and a culture cartographer for the Kaplan Thaler Group in New York City. I hope I've pronounced that correctly. She has circumnavigated the globe on a ship, studying international marketing in 12 countries, and lived, worked, and explored and absorbed cultures in about a dozen more. Her macro-micro view of the world has given her the ability to spot trends and subtle cultural shifts. She contributes to the strategy discussions, oversees research about consumer behavior, listens to social media to monitor culture and social trends, and writes about the future and the what-if scenarios. Please give a good round of applause and welcome Sarah DaVanzo to the stage.
Thank you, Patrick. Thank you. Good morning. Indeed, these are very, very interesting times, and hopefully this morning I'm going to be able to help you make sense of some contradictions in consumer behavior that we're seeing. And before I do that, I want to tell you a little bit about how I approach this. My job is to look at culture, to look at trends, and to look at consumer behavior around the world to help our clients develop their brands, their marketing, and their brand experiences. But I have three passions, and so you're going to see this in my presentation this morning. I love neuroscience, so I love the study of the brain. I love design, and I'm very passionate about emerging technology. So I'm a bit of a geek, so bear with me. So you're going to see a bit of this morning. What I'm seeing presently in the world of design globally is some interesting developments. And I want to start the presentation off with a bit of what I'm seeing, because I think that design mirrors culture. And I often get a lot of clues as to what's happening in culture from the way that the world of design is going. And what I'm seeing specifically are two kinds of design movements that are in the modern design world. One is kind of round and poddy, round and circular, and the other is faceted and what I'm calling snowflakey. And I'll give you some examples from international design. So what we're seeing is the iPod. We're seeing curvilinear, rounded shapes. We're seeing, it's almost, like I said, literally a pod. Egg-like round forms in architecture, in electronics, in interior design, in industrial design. You can see this design, if you will, sentiment being carried through. On the other hand, we're seeing this geometric, faceted, almost a linear design, crystalline, which I think is very reminiscent of a snowflake. So these are two different schools of thought, and I bring them up because the theme of today is egg and snowflake, and hopefully I will be able to paint a picture for you of two different kinds of consumers. And this is basically a metaphor. Clearly, it's a metaphor, like foxes and hedgehogs. It's a metaphor to help you remember these two kinds of consumers, which are at odds with each other. They're paradoxes. And this is very interesting, because when I show you examples, you're going to go, aha, that's why these two contradictory behaviors are taking place in the market. And hopefully, this is going to help you as you design your experiences in flight. So I'm going to use this as a symbol for an egg, and this is a symbol for a snowflake. This is the international sign language, if you will. So this is kind of a visual metaphor for these two consumers. So let me introduce you to them. But I do want to point out that clearly they're at the opposite ends of the spectrum. And a lot of what I do in the world of trend observing is every trend I see a counter trend. There's always, it's like two pendulums swinging like this all the time. And in fact, in some ways today, it seems like it's more exacerbated. There seems to be much more extremes in the marketplace. And I'm going to highlight some of those in a minute. So it's not a surprise that we're seeing egg and snowflake on the other ends of the spectrum. And they're very diametrically opposed. Eggs are very I've painted this, by the way, as metaphor because I think that intuitively it could help you remember these two kinds of consumers. So think about what is an egg like? An egg, it's passive, it sits there, right? It's incubating, it's about hatching an idea, it's developing quietly internally. It's introverted, it's about what's inside the shell. There's depth, there's a lovely core to an egg. And they're consistent. They're sitting, they're sitting and hatching wherever they are. On the other hand, you have snowflakes. Snowflakes are active, right? They're drifting. They are innovating because they're changing with the temperature. They're extroverted because they're, if you will, they're tentacles or whatever, they're fractals or outward facing. They're about breadth, which is a community in some ways. You don't see one snowflake, you see a drift, you see lots of snowflakes. And they're variable, meaning that they drift, like think of a snowdrift. So in those ways, if you could think of the egg and the snowflake consumer, these are metaphors for this behavior. So meet an egg at home, kind of, this is a bit of a joke, but then this egg in the airplane. This is not a joke. This is really what the passenger's like. An egg passenger is the passenger that's about me. It's not about we. This is a passenger that is interested in themselves, is very much thinking to themselves, very quiet. They are introverted. They are the passengers that are looking out the window. They are the passengers that are reading their Kindle or their book. They are the passengers that love the magazine and are savoring it. They are enjoying their food slowly. They're using the time on the plane to basically as a sanctuary to fortify, to feel better as they disembark. An egg has got noise cancellation headphones on, okay? An egg is not having a conversation with the other passengers in the plane. The egg is egging. The egg is totally about a sanctuary experience wherever they are, whether it's at home or whether it's in the plane. So think of the egg in that term. On the other hand, we have snowflakes, and you can imagine what they're like. At home, they're multitasking. They're about the community. They're about we, not me. So a snowflake is the opposite of an egg because I said eggs had noise cancellation. A snowflake has music amplification headphones on. They're the ones that you can listen and you can hear their music. They're multitasking. They're playing Game Boys, they're on their phone, they're on their iPad. They are multitasking in their seat. They're trying to have a conversation with you. They're hitting the button for the in-flight attendants. They're walking up and down the aisles. They are active, they are engaged, they are completely alert. And they are wanting things on demand. They want to be able to order their food on demand, and they want a lot of variety in their entertainment because they are connected. And very importantly, unlike eggs, the snowflakes want exactly the same kind of connectivity they have on the ground. These are the consumers or the passengers that want exactly what they would expect on the ground to take place in the air. Not so with eggs. Eggs are perfectly fine with a very simple experience. So, is one better than the other? I know some men don't want to be snowflakes and some women don't want to be eggs, I don't know. The point is that society, culturally, it's interesting. We don't really value eggs too much right now because it's considered non-competitive. Like in a capitalistic society where you're supposed to be on your game all the time, being an egg is kind of considered a little bit passive. However, I'm going to tell you that that's changing. Neuroscience is suggesting now that we have to disconnect. In fact, there's been great advances in neuroscience recently which have really shown that we really need to take ourselves out of the game and disconnect once in a while. And I mark my word, you know how we have 8 hours of sleep and you drink 6 glasses of water a day? All of these things that we've come to accept as part of our health, egging, by taking ourselves out and relaxing, will be prescriptive within 10 years. We will be using that as part of our daily routines. And what we're seeing already is we're seeing a change taking place. And this is because our homes are no longer a sanctuary. Our homes are where we work. We have businesses out of our homes. We're taking online education. We've got hobbies going on. So where do we relax? Well, we relax, believe it or not, in retail environments, in restaurants, and in airplanes. Airplanes are de facto, or the flying experience is kind of a de facto incubating environment. So I think this is on the rise, and we need to keep aware of it. How do they differ? I'm going to make it very simple. Maybe you've heard of the 4 Ps of marketing. Well, introducing you to the 5 Cs of consumer behavior. Now, these are 5 Cs that I've developed because every single trend presentation I've done in the past year has been about one of these 5 Cs. So these are the 5, if you will, drivers of consumer behavior right now that I feel like is very important for us to be aware of as we're developing our brand experiences. So the first is competition. So how is the passenger or the consumer dealing with this very competitive environment today? How was it dealing with the change? We're constantly in an environment where we're changing with and responding to a compressed time. How are we dealing with our love-hate relationship to technology and connectivity? And what about, how are we dealing with these trade-offs on our conscience? Because there's this new conscientiousness. And finally, control. How are we dealing with the illusion that we've lost control, or the reality that we've lost control? So eggs and snowflakes are the two extremes on all of those polarities. And I'll take you through that now. Competition. As I said, we live in a very dynamic world. We have pandemics and crises and financial breakdowns and all kinds of social change. And the point is that that creates a survival of the fittest mentality. Fight or flight. Actually, egg or snowflake. I'm retreating, I'm hiding, I'm hunkering down, or I'm bring it on, I'm dealing with it directly head on. I'll give you an example. This is just the industry of energy drinks. Everyone's familiar with a Genki drink and an energy drink. But are you aware that there were 41 relaxation drinks that were launched last year? To give you an indication that we have this pause and fast forward. It's kind of like when you watch TV. Sometimes you're watching like maybe a sports game and you're leaning into the game and you're kind of really engaged with the game and you're leaning forward. And other times you're leaning backwards and you're relaxed. You're alert, but there's two different ways of consuming that media. Eggs are leaning back and snowflakes are leaning forward. This is interesting because I think how we've defined success has changed over the past couple of decades. We used to be defined by our success on what you own, your possessions. And then it used to be a little bit about who you know, right? Like that defines whether you're successful or not. Well, actually today it's about where you go. And that's because time is the currency, is the luxury that we have today. To have the time to go someplace, to have the mobility to go someplace is quite the luxury. And so we have this travel one-upmanship. And what we're seeing in the marketplace is very interesting, is that consumers use this and project where they've been in a way to basically get competitive advantage. This is about that the competitive one-upmanship. And that's fostered a whole culture of projecting where we've been, our statuses. And I call it the status culture 2.0. So we tell everybody where we've been, but there's a problem. I can tell everyone right now that I'm in Paris. And only a few people would know, only the people in this room would know that I'm not in Paris. So we can lie. We can lie online. And the millennial market, specifically the millennials, know this very well. And so that is what has actually driven this new culture now of geolocation, if you will, apps, that basically is a proof that you've been to a place. Because I won't get the badge unless I've actually been to the place. This whole genre of technology has emerged primarily as a result of the fact that people want proof that you've been where you say you've been. And I think this is really interesting, because remember I talk about paradoxes, right? What's old is new again. Well, 100 years ago, we were using luggage tags to basically project where we've been. So there's a similarity there in your industry, and also frequent flyer cards to a certain extent. Change. How are we dealing with change? Well, we live in a 24/7 on-demand, society. Time is really, really fast. What's really interesting is that with every kind of innovation and time, compressed time scenario, there's innovation. Half of the clients that I talk to are looking back in the past, are looking at the past, not the future. I think a great example of this is Coca-Cola, which is global, knows they need to be in both places. So on one hand, they have classic Coke products, which I think is kind of egg-like in certain respects. And then on the other hand, they've got futuristic, very high design products that project themselves into the future.